Social media impacts your life in many different ways. In fact, I don't even know if you can track just how many times and in how many different ways a social media app can, well, influence what happens during the course of your day, or at least what you're exposed to. I mean, let's be honest. Have you ever had a conversation that seemed to be between you and another party vocally, and all of a sudden, magically, something on your phone got linked? Maybe it's coincidence, whatever, but all of a sudden you were talking about barbecue tongs and you get an ad for barbecue tongs. Should concern you. Maybe it doesn't. I guess it really doesn't matter. But there are some big hurdles that these social media companies are coming up on. And I think it's interesting that we're starting to see, some folks report on it, at least when it gets to the trades. At that point, you know that there are some big conversations happening in some very small rooms, trying to figure out how to overcome these issues. So, when you're the product, what can you expect? Let's take a look. Once again, from Variety's VIP platform, we get some data. And this is one of the nice things about Variety that you don't seem to get in other places. Occasionally, The Wrap will give you something. Occasionally, The Hollywood Reporter will give you something. But when it comes to these trade papers, VIP kind of is more information driven, or at least they make it appear that way. Let's take a look at this story. Social media giants face uncertain future. Ooh, sounds ominous. Macroeconomic factors usually impact major social media companies in similar ways. But in Q4, the three social giants, Meta, Snap, and Twitter, all outline different narratives and mixed messaging for the future of their businesses. Actually, they did that very publicly, trying to inform investors, at least the retail ones, the direction that they're headed. If you're an institutional investor or part of an institutional group, you already know where they're headed. They've been saying it, kind of hinting at it for quite some time. You'll see it in business journals and places most people don't read, like Fortune and Forbes and things like that. But anyway, we'll get back to this. Meta, kicking off things in February 2nd, basically said it was dismal to say the least. The stock hemorrhaged 26% in the following trading session, reporting disappointing user growth. And you remember that Meta stock, because again, they changed their name for a reason to Meta. Okay, that thing fell like a rock. 230 billion lost in a day of trading. Holy cow, that is the most market value lost in the history of any US company. I mean, you're only going to see that eclipsed by what's about to happen in the Chinese real estate stocks. But hey, we'll talk about that another time and when it actually happens. The company had a long list of reasons why, including Apple's iOS privacy update, rising inflation, and supply chain disruptions. I'm not sure how any of those things, other than the iOS update, could have done anything to this. It was probably the update primarily, because guess what? Inflation doesn't have anything to do with ad revenues, and neither do supply disruptions. But I'll continue. All of which, Meta said, were impacting advertisers' budgets. Again, inflation's not, these are quarterly investments. This is not something that's going to hit these advertisers that way. And it's incremental advertising, but I don't want to dive too deeply into that. Snap and Twitter stocks fell in sympathy, and many were worried they could face the same fate, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, you get across the social media sphere, a lot of these apps rely on advertising. Well, in fact, they rely strictly on that. You are the product. I keep wanting to drive that home, but we'll keep going. So if you look at these numbers, or at least the way this chart's put together, social media ad revenue stagnation, and it shows how that goes up and down and up and down and up and down, and who it's actually associated with. And as you see, Snap was hit really, really hard in the first quarter of 2019, where it had a massive dip in its ad revenue. It looked like it even went negative, at least as far as percentage of growth. When you get to Q2, you see that everything's kind of rebounded and looking good in Q2 of 2020. By the time we get to 2021, everything's on the upswing again. In fact, by the time you get to Q2 of 2021, Snap's way over everybody else, up over 100% of ad revenue, quarter over quarter over the course of 2 years. So it constantly kept rising. And you see that, Meta is actually, while in last place, is still doing pretty well, about 35, nearly 40% of revenue, almost even 50% of a revenue bounce for them. And of course, the more flat Twitter is also at their apex. Now, where we get to now is the ad revenue change percentage year over year. By the time we get to Q4 of 2021, it has dropped substantially, and that's kind of what set the market off to where it was, if you care. In reading from the article, but that was hardly the case. In fact, Snap stock skyrocketed as much as 60% after the company beat Q4 statistics across the board February 3rd and issued a better than expected guidance for Q1. Not to mention, it was Snap's first profitable quarter in net income basis since becoming a public company. Well, there you go. Twitter didn't perform quite as strongly as expected, but the company also had a major shakeup in leadership during the fourth quarter. That's right. Founder and CEO Jack Dorsey said, "See ya." And that's probably a good thing, to be honest with you. He was not a believable frontman, and they brought in another guy, Parag Agrawal, that is also not a believable frontman. So I don't know, maybe they need to learn a better lesson. Anyway, Twitter missed Q4 estimates, but guidance for the first quarter came in line with obviously Wall Street's expectations, and CFO Ned Siegel reiterated the company's long-term user and revenue growth outlook. And of course I'm going to add words, seemed positive. Social media daily active users have ticked up, as you see. Quarter over quarter, I don't see a lot of stagnation here or anybody losing ground outside of maybe the second quarter of 2020 across the board, which I guess you could have anticipated. But when you look at Facebook, you're looking at nearly 2 billion active daily users. When you're looking at Snap, you're looking at 319 million daily users. And when you look at Twitter, you're looking at 217 million daily users. Facebook has a clear advantage over there for Meta. Meta's Facebook saw quarterly daily active users decline for the first time ever, while Snap and Twitter both logged stable user growth. And again, you can see that here effectively in the chart. The peak pandemic era growth wasn't likely or expected, but the advertising spend backdrop remained strong. According to Magna, global ad revenue surged to an all-time high of $710 billion in 2021, with digital advertising being 62% of total ad sales worldwide. Holy cow, that's a lot of money. So as you can see, global downloads for social apps have been on a, it had been on a tear for a while, but we'll read through the article here to break that down. Not to mention, even as the world began to crawl towards some semblance of normalcy, social media consumption remained relatively high and stable in Q4 based on the social app downloads data compiled by Sensor Tower. Downloads for Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat increased, while Twitter saw a small decline between October and December. That's to be expected. I mean, at a certain point, there's no more people that you're going to be able to pull into your market. You have reached the state of maturity, which I have to tell you, I think we're closer and closer to maturity across the board for all of this stuff, just like we are with streaming, but that's another conversation for another day. To be fair to Meta and the rest of the group, macroeconomic circumstances and the Apple privacy update are not within their control. Well, of course, Apple actually rolled out a privacy update that did actually guarantee you a little bit more privacy. Unfortunately, apps like, let's say TikTok seem to be able to avoid anything that, Apple comes up with. And of course, Android isn't even trying, or so it would seem. Meta warned in Q3 that it would see a meaningful impact to Q4 financials, but these companies have a decent amount of time now to figure out ways to mitigate the blow, and of course they always do. And you see that usually happen through manipulations that, could be stock buybacks, could be, the purchasing of another entity to bring more users into the fold. You can see things that Disney does with their streaming platform, where they change the way things are bundled to try to artificially increase subscriber numbers. There's always a shell game involved with these tech companies and any of these tech-oriented industries, even like the streaming services from the studios. But we'll keep going. Social media companies rely too heavily on ad revenue to drive overall top-line growth, which you can't argue with. The investors are now learning that these challenges come and what the kind of reliance can actually cost them. If it wasn't clear before, it was crystal clear following Q4 results that any sort of deceleration of overall advertising spend caused by external macro issues will heavily impact Meta, Twitter, and Snap stocks. So essentially what they're saying is, be wary of these stocks, or at least be aware of these stocks and some of the pitfalls that could be, well, lying in front of them. I mean, you've watched when things hit a bumpy road, they hit a bumpy road pretty hard, and unlike Spotify, which seemed to have recovered from their hiccup, I think Twitter's going to have a harder time, or a harder row to hoe, if you prefer. Now, just Wednesday, or last Wednesday, I should say, Google announced that it is actually going to make an attempt to improve on their privacy. And boy, do they need to. And let me tell you why. Both Apple and Google have been subject to some European privacy laws, and when it comes to cybersecurity, for whatever reason, they take it far more seriously than we do in the United States, which is ridiculous. We should have very, very strict versions of privacy for our, I don't know, everything. But hey, I can rage about those another time. Understand that this is from the article now. Even as the big three look to diversify revenue streams, the ambitions for the metaverse, AR and VR-centric worlds, are still in the very, very early stages. If anything, these companies are pouring cash into these new ventures, and let me tell you, by the truckload. And it will likely take a significant amount of time before there is any ROI, return of investment. Investors in social media may be in for a roller coaster ride this year. And I would suggest that's probably the case. Again, if you're going to change the way your phone is allowed to collect data about you, and believe me, that's what these operating systems kind of help to control, with the exception, again, of TikTok, which I did a video on previously, farming for data is going to be more difficult for them. And I can say thank you for that, but it's a little too late. Anyway, what do you think? Do you think we're going to start seeing, some changes in the way that these social media platforms are looked at? I think so. Do you think that there's going to be a upside for any of these social media platforms over the course of the next 3, 4, 5, 6 quarters? I'm a little more hesitant when it comes to them as far as an investment, because I can see some of the handwriting on the wall. And based on some of the things that have happened recently in another country, to our north maybe, here in the United States, you can see that some of your social media stuff, or any of your stuff, if it becomes compromised, can make you a bit of a target. And that, believe me, can make you a little wary of utilizing these platforms, or maybe even a banking app, which is amazing to think about. But anyway, and do you think that, in the long term, that these social media giants may actually have difficulty surviving? I think there's only going to be 1 or 2 left at the end of it all, outside of obviously the entertainment social services like YouTube and things like that. So I don't know. I think there's a decent chance we could be down to 1 or 2. With that being said, I'm just curious what you think, so do use that comment section down below. I truly would appreciate it. Also, be sure to support other independent creators here on the platform. I know I say it every time, but I 100% mean it. They are not getting the push that the corporate content creators do. In fact, you can see that in the way the advertisement works on the social media we were just talking about. So be sure to hit a like, hit a subscribe, share out their content, and obviously comment, because it really does increase engagement. In fact, I would hope that you do that here on my channel as well. And of course, I'll end the video the same way I always do, which is to say, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, wash your hands, of course, because it's good hygiene. And until next time, bye.
Thanks for visiting today. Be sure you're subscribed and hit that for alerts.
Yay!
Of course, like and share all of the videos that you can, as it helps with the algorithm. Have a great day.